Alright, good afternoon, students. Welcome to the Learner Development and Learning subject for the students doing DPP, LDL, and the DJP, LDL students. This is your exam-based contact session for the 2020 exams. This includes the April-May exams, the August exams, and the November exams, which is also known as our supplementary exams. I am your tutor, Yuna Kario, and my contact details are shown on the screen there as my email address and my contact number. So I'm going to go ahead and give you all the topics that you should expect in your 2020 exams. And remember, students, this includes the April-May exams, the August exams, and the November exams. What this means is that I'm not going to do another presentation for the August or the November exams. Everything is included in this presentation of today. Okay, let's start off now with part 1. Okay, this is just a welcoming remarks that I've already done. Maybe just to highlight that as your tutor, thank you, I'm reminding you that you are responsible for your own marks as students, and you are also responsible for the effort that you put in your work. Hence, you are advised to dedicate hard work and commitment to your course as you continue with the LDL exams. As your tutor, I'm responsible for marking your exams and for marking your assignments as well for this subject, LDL. So I'll go through the parts that are part of this subject. We have about 4 parts, but under each part there will be they'll cover sections in your module or in your subject guide. I'm not going to give page numbers for the study guides because some of the students, they do call and ask for page numbers on where to get that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you topics or subtopics. For example, I can give a topic like maturation or development, and then as a student, you're supposed to actually to go through your study guides and any other textbook that you have and read more. So we would, personally as your tutor, I do not expect students to be calling me and asking for page numbers for their topics, for the topics that I'm gonna give you today. Okay, let's go ahead now and go to part 1. Okay, part 1 will cover the following points. There are about 6 points here. There's 1.1, which is now the difference between growth and maturation. 1.2, the barriers to learning. 1.3, the features of the Maslow hierarchy of needs theory. 1.4, we have the role of teachers as role models in the classroom for learners. 1.5 covers the Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. And then we have 1.6, which covers the areas of development in the learner's development. Okay, let's start off now with the difference between growth and maturation. Just before I go into discussing the difference between growth and maturation, let me just highlight to you students that the way I set these exams, all 3 exams, the April, May exams, the August exams, and the November exam, is that you have multiple choice questions, you have true or false questions, and you have, and then you have your short questions, short answer questions, and then you have a bit of essay questions towards the end of the paper. So the topics that we are covering in all these parts, part 1, part 2, 3, and 4, some of the topics will be included in the multiple choice questions or in the true or false questions. So, but then I will not highlight which one. So for you, is to prepare for all the topics I'm going to discuss today. You should prepare and study well, because any of these topics will be in all the 3 exams. So it does not mean that part 1 is the only thing that you find in the May-April exam. What it means that all the topics you have from part 1 up to part 4, they are all part of all the 3 question papers. I hope that is clear. Okay, now let's start with the difference between growth and maturation. What you are expected to discuss here in your exam is that you should know that there is a difference when you talk about maturation and when you talk about development and when we talk about growth. They might sound the same, but they are not as you have them in your study guides. For example, when we talk about growth, we are actually talking of issues that have to do maybe with the increase in the child's weight or in the size of the body parts of a child. That is growth. But when you talk about maturation, we are actually talking about a different thing. In this case, maturation involves the process of learning to cope and react in an emotionally appropriate way. That is, when you talk about a child who has matured, we are talking about someone who has actually learned how to cope with or how to react in an appropriate way. That is maturation. Okay, so it's up to you now to add more on that. And of course, in this case, the amount or the marks allocated per each question will actually guide you on how long you should answer. If it's a question that asks, for example, the difference between growth and maturation, and it's a 4-mark question, obviously that question just requires you to give a definition whereby you are defining what maturation is and what growth is. But if the question is worth 12 marks, for example, that question, in any case, it will ask you to discuss the difference. In that discussion, we don't only expect you to give a definition, but we want you to go and discuss further more on how maturation differs from growth, and also give examples of how growth and maturation are different from each other. The use of examples in your answers will actually score you more marks as you go forward with your answering. And then we have the barriers to learning. The barriers to learning. There are several barriers to learning that you find in your study guides. For example, we have the psychosocial difficulties. Psychosocial difficulty can also be a barrier to learning. What do we actually mean by when we say something is a barrier? When something is a barrier, it's like something that hinders you or keeps you from learning. So in this case now, what are the barriers that learners have in their learning? When you talk about the psychosocial difficulties, this is not all the barriers that we have. It's just an example of some of the barriers or difficulties that a child might encounter and which might hinder them from learning. So when you talk about, for example, when you say psychosocial difficulties, these are things like neglect. When a child has been neglected, this can actually hinder that child from learning. We have other learning difficulties or barriers to learning, which are things like sensory difficulties. For example, a child that has got hearing loss, for instance, that is a sensory difficulty. And hearing loss, as we know it, for a child who's in your classroom and has got difficulty in hearing, that can also be seen, or the child can encounter that also as a barrier to learning. It makes it difficult for them to learn in your classroom when they have hearing loss, or for example they've got problems with their eyesight. That can also be an example of what can keep them from learning. So these barriers to learning, they are discussed as the word appears in your study guide. So you have to learn them and you have to discuss them, and you have to actually give examples of how, just like the way I've given an example of how a hearing loss can be a problem in your classroom for a child who wants to learn and they are unable to learn, and what can you do as a teacher to actually assist a learner in your classroom who has got a hearing loss, as an example of a barrier to learning. I can also give another example here. We have emotional and behavioral difficulties. Learners that are having emotional instability. They are emotionally not well. Their behavior is not, I'll say there's a problem in their behavior simply caused by issues maybe that might be happening in their lives at home and such things, and this keeps them from learning. You can also explain more of how a child's emotional instability can also be seen or can also cause as a difficulty to learning, or it can be a hindrance to learning. We move on to 1.3, which are the features of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. Before you start on discussing all the different points that we have under the Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory, we have to first of all define what the theory is all about. For example, here I've given you a short description of what the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is all in short, what it means. This theory, it has the important belief that everyone is born with a specific need. Hence, we have the word needs theory there, that each and every one of us, when you are born into this world, you do have a specific need that you want, and that need you want it to be met. Okay, I will quickly just go through some of the Maslow's needs as he put them from the first one. The first of these needs, of course, is our basic needs for survival. Maslow tells us that every one of us has got a need for food. We have a need for sleep. We have a need for water. We have a need for food. As I mentioned earlier, these are our physiological needs, as he puts it there. So we need all these needs to be made. So once our basic needs or survival needs are met, then we move on to the secure needs. So you have to discuss all these needs and understand and give examples of what these needs are and why Maslow says these needs should be met. Why is it important for us to have our physiological needs met? As I said, for our need for water, our need for sleep. Because if you do not have your needs met, of course, if you do not have enough sleep as a human being, you have difficulty coping with life. The same also for your children in your classroom. You should know that all of these kids, are their needs met? Do they have enough water? Do they come to your classroom with enough water to drink? Are they having enough food? Are they having enough sleep? So ensure that all the physiological needs are met. And then now, after Maslow talks about the physiological needs, we come to the secure needs. He calls them the secure needs. This is the second set of needs. When we talk about secure needs or safety needs, here we are talking about, am I living in a clean and secure environment? Is my environment clean? Am I safe? Am I safe from, for example, from infections that might be happening in my environment? Do I live in a place whereby I can say it's secure enough for me to live my life without being worried whether my health is going to be in danger? Those are what we mean by the secure and safety needs. Then we come on to the third level of needs, which is our need to belong, our belonging need, or the sense of belonging need. So in this need, we talk about we have, as human beings, we have that need to attempt to belong to a greater whole. We need the issue of love. Do you have someone in your life that you feel like they can offer you love, or you are offering love to them? You belong to a certain place, you belong to a certain family, you belong to a certain classroom, to a certain club, to a certain section in society. Those are what Maslow talks about in our sense. And as human beings, we have that need of belonging. And then the final level, or the fourth level, is the level of self-actualization. So I will leave one to you up to find out and to discuss more as you go through your study guides. You should actually discuss more on what we mean by, what Maslow means by self-actualization need, or hierarchy of needs, as he explains it. And then 1.4, the role of teachers as role models in the classroom for learners. As a teacher, obviously this one we know that when your children or your learners sit in that classroom, they look up to you, the teacher, and you should actually understand that as a teacher, the mere fact that you are standing in front of these kids every morning, you are a role model. So you owe it up to yourself and to them to behave in a way that you portray the role of a role model. So what is expected for you as a teacher to do as a role model? So in this instance, you are going to discuss what the teacher should do in order to become a role model in the classroom for his or her learners. For example, as a teacher, you should encourage the learners to behave morally. You should actually encourage learners to avoid things like cheating, because it's not moral for a child. Sorry, it's not moral for a child or for a learner or for any human being to cheat, be it in the classroom, be it outside the classroom. So you have to tell the learners, or discuss this, have this discussion with them. After you have discussed it with them, actually you should now act as per your discussion. You have to lead by example. There's no way you can tell learners that do not cheat, and at the same time, you as a teacher, you are cheating or you are lying, because you have to tell the learners what is right and what is wrong, and you have to portray this behavior to the learners explaining to them why it's important for them to know what's the difference between what is right and what is wrong. Okay, you have to make learners to be aware of what is happening in their world. If there's anything that is happening currently whereby you can use as an example to tell the learners what is right and what is wrong, use that opportunity and discuss with the learners why it's important for them to do the right thing and why it's wrong to do the wrong thing. Show learners why it's important to help others, why it's important for you as a human being to help other people, and also engage in activities that are age appropriate activities. This is also part of moral behavior. Praise learners in their achievements, whether it's academic achievement or whether it's extramural activities. For each and every learner in your class, you should actually find something where you can actually praise their achievement. Learners that are excelling in your class should not be the only learners that receive praise from you as a teacher. For each and every child, whether it's a child that usually comes late and that day they are early in the morning, praise them for their early coming that specific day. Whether it's a learner who is always the last one to hand in their classwork, if that day they hand it in on time compared to the other days, please do give them praise. This is what we mean by other activities. So praise should not only be given to a learner who has scored a 90% in a test or in an exam. Praise should come in all forms of ways. This is some of the ways that you as a teacher can be a role model to your learners. This is just a quick discussion, but there's more on how you can discuss the role of the teacher in the classroom as a role model. 1.5, we have the Harvard Gartner's multiple intelligence theory. This theory, let's just start off from the word multiple. When we talk about multiple, we talk about many things. When things are multiple are many. So what are these many things? The many things we are talking about here is the intelligences. Okay, meaning that Gartner believed that as human beings, we have got different types of intelligences. There are people who have intelligence in music. There are people who have intelligence in linguistics or in verbal communication. There are people who have intelligence in mathematics and logic. There are people who have intelligence and bodily or kinesthetic intelligence. And then there are people who are actually having intelligence in, who have intelligence in visual or spatial intelligence. And then there are those who have the naturalistic intelligence. But what we should understand as we are discussing this intelligence is that none of this intelligence is considered to be more valuable than the other. As a teacher, as you assess your learners, when you are assessing your learners, as you are identifying how your learner copes, how your learner responds in your classroom, you must bear it in mind that there is no intelligence which is mightier than the other intelligence. You will find a child who is like I said, linguistic intelligence, who has got intelligence in language, in learning language. What do you mean by verbal or linguistic intelligence here? You mean that this child or this learner in your classroom, this learner in your classroom finds it very easy to learn different languages. He or she can pick up the languages very easily compared to other learners in her classroom or in his or her age group. But this child, we can say, is verbally or linguistic intelligent. But then in the same class, you might find a learner who has got mathematical or logical intelligence. Now, what Gartner tells us here is that we shouldn't actually put more value on one type of intelligence. We shouldn't say because you are good in mathematics, you are the most intelligent person in the classroom, or because you are good with language, you are the most intelligent in the classroom. There are learners who are actually more intelligent in music, who actually can compose music, who are more rhythmic in understanding or reading music. These people also have intelligence. So what we should understand that learners have got different intelligence. Some might have two or more of these intelligences, but you should understand that multiple intelligence talks about different people having different types of intelligences, as I put it there. Okay. And then we move on to the areas of development in the learner's development. In this case, we talk about areas such as the cognitive or the emotional development that the learner might have. We've got social development. Of course, when we talk about social, we talk about the society as a whole and what it plays in the role of a learner's development. Cognitive, we talk about the issue that has to involve the mind of the child, how the child thinks. And then you've got emotional. This refers to the feelings that the child has. Those are part of development. So all these areas, they do play in how a child develops. Remember, our subject is learner development, so we are looking at all the issues that involve, that affect and has an impact on how the child is developing. So hence, we have to put into consideration all the things that can play a role in how the child is developing. And these are the issues that I just mentioned. Now we've got the social development, we've got the cognitive development, and we've got emotional development. And as the students of LDL, you should be able to explain what we mean by cognitive development, what is meant by social development. And when we talk about emotional development of a child, what are we actually talking about? That was part 1. Let's move on to part 2. Okay, part 2, we have 4 points there. The first one, we have classical conditioning. As part of the behaviorist theory, we've got the attachment theory. We've got the different learning style, got the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic learning style, and we've got the humanistic theory. So I just put it there as they are. I did not put how they will come in all the 3 question papers, but be rest assured that all these topics are going to be in all of your 3 exams. Okay, so let's start with classical conditioning. What is classical conditioning in generally? Classical conditioning, we are informed, or we are told by the behaviorist theory, because it's part of the behaviorist theory of learning. The behaviorist theory of learning define classical conditioning as a strategy for shaping behavior in which a neutral stimulus is paired with a pleasure one. So you are actually conditioned to behave in a certain way, but as you are being told to behave in a certain way, you are given something which is pleasurable to do. For example, I can give the example that they give in our study guides, what I'm going to use here. For example, as a parent, okay, right now we are in December, and most of the parents will be traveling with their children. And you know, if you have a child who's under the age of 5 years, or any child who's still a minor, they do not enjoy these long rides or long trips of traveling. So you want your aim now is to make your child actually to accept this long trip that you are going to embark on as you go on your holiday. So now when you talk about classical conditioning, so what you are going to do now, you have a behavior. You want your child to actually accept or to not to resent traveling. So what you do, you actually, in this long trip that you give to your child, you let your child to do something that you don't normally allow. For example, you don't always allow your child to eat cookies, for example, unless it's a treat. So in this case, what you do now, when you start off with this long drive, let's say you are driving from here all the way up to Henty's Bay, and you know it's going to be a 5-6 hour drive from Windhoek to Henty's Bay. So what you do, you actually allow your child that, okay, we are going to take this 6-hour drive, but I'm going to allow you to eat cookies along the road. So now what you have done, you have actually pay as in a pay, like 2 things. You actually paired this behavior with a pleasurable treat. So you allowing your child to have to eat the cookies along the road, along the trip, is actually, you have actually conditioned your child to actually accept a long drive or a long trip, road trip, with eating cookies. So the child will actually know that, okay, even though I'm going to be sitting in the car for all these 6 hours, not playing with my toys, not playing with my friends, I am actually forced to sit in this car for all these 6 hours. At least I'm going to be eating the cookies. So in other words, you have actually conditioned your child to accept the long sit for 6 hours with the issue of eating the cookies. So the child has already accepted this behavior, and the child is going to behave in a appropriate way. He or she will not throw tantrums. He will not cry unnecessarily because he's enjoying the fact that he's eating these cookies that he doesn't always get to eat. So in this way is an example of classical conditioning, whereby the behavior of the child has been modified in such a way that it's a good behavior, but it came with a pleasurable stimulus. That's what we mean by that. So when you are discussing this, please do give examples. You are free to use my example, put it in a proper way. As long as you are able to express yourself and I know what you mean, you can put an example in your own classroom, what you can do to your learners. You want them to behave in a certain way, you can actually say, for you to finish this homework within the 20 minutes, at the end of the day, you are going to get this trait. That is more or less what we mean by classical conditioning of behavior, as it's stipulated by the behaviorist theories that have mentioned to us, or that have indicated to us what we mean by the behaviorist theory. Okay, then we move on to 2.2, which is the attachment theory. Attachment theory, we have what we call secure attachment and insecure attachment. But before you go to discussing what we mean by the secure attachment and the insecure attachment, as students, I actually expect you first of all to define what is meant by attachment theory. And if the question, because this question I might have phrased them in different ways in different question papers, but if the question expects or asks you to give a distinction between secure attachment and insecure attachment, please do give the different distinction that is there. And of course, like I said, give a clear definition of what is meant by the attachment theory. There are many books that have written on the theory of attachment. You can find that, and your study guides also have given us a definition of attachment. And of course, the distinction between secure and insecure attachment is also clearly defined in your study guides. I'm not going to go into detail about these attachments. You can read more on that. I'll move on now to 2.3, whereby you've got the different learning styles. We've got the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic learning styles. Okay, in our classroom, we have learners with different learning styles. Learners do not learn in the same way, in the same manner, in the same format. They've got different learning styles. There are some learners who are more visual. There are learners who are more auditorial. There are learners who are more kinesthetic. So what do you mean by learners that are visual? A learner who's visual is a learner who actually learns better when they use pictures. When they can visualize something, when they can see something in a picture, then they learn better. They can actually remember it more. They can actually retain it more in their memory when they've seen a picture. That's what we mean by the visual learning style. These visual learners, they're actually able to understand concepts more when they've actually seen pictures or they've seen diagrams of the concept that you are referring to in your explanations. So as you are teaching, do make provision that there are learners that might be more of or more into visual learning than other types of learning. And then the second type of learning we have there is the auditory learning. These are learners that learn through listening, through interpreting information, or they learn a lot when the teacher reads out loud. Okay? So you should actually have a session or a part in your lesson preparation whereby you actually read out loud for the learners as you are teaching. This can actually be catering for those learners that learn or that discover more knowledge, or they are able to retain more knowledge when they listen, when they are listening to the information that is being given. Unlike the visual learners that learn through pictures or through diagrams, these learners, they actually learn more through listening or hearing information, and mostly when this information is being read out aloud by the teachers. Okay, we have the third part there, which is the kinesthetic learners. These are learners who learn best with the hands-on approach. These are learners who actually will tell you that I will remember it more if I actually do it myself. Maybe it also depends on the subject that you are teaching at the moment at that specific time in your classroom. But you should also just bear in mind that we do have learners that would actually remember things better when they are actually learning by the movement of their hands or by doing something with their own hands. These are the kinesthetic learners. 2.4, the humanistic theory. This theory, it believes in the aspect of someone or mentally healthy, taking responsibility of their action, and each person inherits its worthy of the ultimate goal of living is to attain personal growth and understanding. So in this case, the ultimate goal of living is to attain personal growth and understanding. So humanistic theory, it looks at how human beings' main aim in life is to attain personal growth. If as a human being you have not grown, your own personal growth is not, and your own understanding, people have not understood you or understood that your personal growth is there, then we say humanistic theory is not involved. So the ultimate goal of humanistic theory is for humans to have personal growth. So you are expected to discuss more on that, and how does that affect the learners in your classroom, how does it affect the teaching in your own classroom. So it also looks at the issue, like I mentioned earlier. It looks at the human, as a human being, you take responsibility of your own action, and each and every one of us has got that responsibility to take care of our own actions. And you also have that aspect of being mentally healthy. That's what we mean by the humanistic theory. So you will be expected to discuss more on that theory. I'm just giving you a hint on what it means when we talk about the humanistic theory. I've not gone into detail. I'm not gonna go into detail on it. I'm just giving an overview look on what it's all about, like I said. So I will leave it there, and I'll move on to part 3. In part 3 we have got about 7 points. I think part 3 is the longest part that we have. Part 4 shouldn't be this long. Okay, here we have the issue of discipline. We talk about the signs that a child in your classroom is sexually abused. We talk about the environmental factors or stress that is associated with poverty. We have discipline, again, of learners in the learning process. We have got the issue of self-concept and motives. And then we talk about the illnesses that may affect. In the 2020 exams, I took 2 diseases that I included illnesses. It's only HIV and AIDS and TB. Those are the only illnesses that you know that in your study guides you have all types of illnesses that I put there in for you to understand how they can affect learning and how the symptoms involved. But in these 2020 exams, I can safely tell you that the only illness that you should concentrate on is the TB illness and HIV and AIDS. How the questions will be phrased, it all depends on the question paper. I'm not here to discuss with you how the questions are phrased, but all I can tell you is that you should look at the issue of TB and the issue of HIV and AIDS. Okay, now let's start off with the issue of discipline. The concept of discipline is main functions in teaching learners to develop positive self-concept. You remember also this self-concept, we have it in 3.5, but we are also discussing it in 3.1. But in 3.1 we are discussing it under the issue of discipline. Okay, the concept of discipline, it guides positive behavior in learners. In other words, why do we have discipline? Why do we as teachers emphasize on the issue of discipline in the teaching and learning process? Why should our learners be disciplined? It's here it tells us in my notes that I just put down here. We say discipline guides positive behavior in learners. When learners are disciplined, it actually helps them to have positive behavior. It helps students to progress and how to control their own behavior. When learners are disciplined, they can control their own behavior. It can also assist them in progressing to become better at what they are doing. It also teaches children to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong. And when you remember, as a teacher in your classroom, you don't have to achieve discipline by inflicting pain in a child. It does not mean that because you are emphasizing a discipline, you have to inflict pain on a child to say, now I've disciplined you because I caused you pain. Remember that legally in our schools, it's against the law. It's illegal to apply corporal punishment in this same vein. Again, please do understand that when even though we are not allowing our school system does not allow corporal punishment, it does not mean that they allow ill discipline. You can actually discipline your children in your classroom, in your environment, in your whole school. You can discipline your learners without inflicting pain, without applying corporal punishment. So there is actually a difference between teaching children to do what is right without inflicting pain on them. In fact, it's not even allowed to do that. So you are supposed to actually to help learners to know that when they do something wrong, there are consequences, and these consequences does not involve inflicting pain on them. The learners, they can be detained after school, they can actually sit after school and sit on detention. They can actually sit 2 hours more and do their homework. The learners, they can actually be told to actually clean the classroom when they have misbehaved in your classroom. I don't think punishing a child to clean the classroom will inflict pain on the child. So that is an example that I can just give them. We have got 3.2, the signs that a child in your classroom is sexually abused. As a teacher in your own classroom, you are supposed to look out for any difference in the behavior of your learners. We live in a world where there's abuse happening in the homes of our learners. There's abuse happening in our own schools. So as a teacher, you're supposed to look out for any of these differences in the behavior of the child. It will tell you. For example, for a child that was socially active, who had a lot of friends, who would easily interact with other learners, when this child no longer feels free to interact with other children in the classroom, when this child all of a sudden does not have friends, doesn't want to talk to anyone, you should actually as a teacher take that notice. You should actually notice that and actually try to understand what has caused the huge difference in a child's behavior, what has led to that. And then, of course, most of the time when we do investigate this, we find that the child might be going through some abuses that is happening to him or her. So what will you actually notice, or the signs that a child in your classroom has been sexually abused? You will find that a child who's been sexually abused might have difficulty in walking or sitting. A child that used to be bubbly, run around in the class or outside the class, no longer walks freely, is no longer sitting freely in your classroom. When they are told to sit down, they are fidgeting, they are moving up and down, then you should know that something might be wrong. A child who has been sexually abused might find it difficult to make friends. That all of a sudden they don't want to make friends, or they are afraid of making friends because they are afraid of making friends because of what is happening to them. A child who is sexually abused, we are also told that he or she can actually easily overreact when they are surprised because they are in fright. They are fearful of any surprises that is happening due to the abuse that they are going through. And if this sexual abuse is happening in the home where they are coming from, and in such a case whereby the person who's actually the perpetrator in this case might be a person who's very close to them, a very familiar person. If a child is fearful of that familiar person or familiar face, then you should also note down and know that this is also another sign of abuse happening in the home where the child is from. And as teachers, you are advised that such cases should not be left in your classroom. It shouldn't end there. It should actually be given to your life skill teacher at your school, and it should also taken up or referred to the social workers within the environment that you live in, or the town that you are, or the district where you live. And the child should actually be helped, but it can actually be noticed by the teacher. And as a teacher, you have the responsibility for the well-being of your learners in your classroom. Okay, now we move on to 3.3. Environmental stress. How is it associated with poverty? In other words, how does poverty lead to environmental stress for your learners? Learners that are coming from poverty-stricken homes, how does that poverty lead to environmental stress? Low engagement in poor households may result to low income household. Children that are raised in houses or in homes where there is extreme poverty, these children do not have as much access to resources where they can learn. They do not have much access to an environment whereby they can actually explore. I can say explore their own abilities, their own academic abilities, their own extramural activities. Maybe a child is talented in singing, for example. A child is talented maybe in music. For a child who grows up in a well-up family, when a child is interested in music, it's very easy for that child to be enrolled, for example, in piano lessons, or in singing lessons, or in dancing lessons by the parent, because the money is available for that. But for a child who has got music talent and does not have money, or the parents do not have the access to enroll the child to do piano lessons or to do any music lessons, that child, you can say, there's low engagement, and as a result, this is now what we mean by environmental stress. Because of the poverty that you live in, you are not having access, and this can lead on to the stress. The child sits in the classroom learning other subjects, but the child has interest in music, but because of the poverty in which the child finds herself or himself in, her dream or her interest of learning music is not, that opportunity is not availed, and at the end of the day, that can lead to the stress that can happen in the child in your own classroom. Poor housing, poor sanitation. We know that poor housing and poor sanitation can lead to many illnesses or environmental stress. We know that some illnesses like the hepatitis E that we have had here in Window, that is a result of poor housing and poor sanitation that our people do experience in the kind of environment that they have. We have heard of children who have died in Namibia because of malnutrition, due to the dry season that we've had. That is also an example of poverty, which can lead to malnutrition. We have got parents that have multiple jobs, or caregivers that actually do a lot of jobs or multiple jobs, simply because the one job that they have is not enough to sustain or to keep their children, or to provide for their children. So at the end of the day, okay, I'm told I'm not left with some. At the end of the day, so these children are living in a very stressful environment. So discuss that a bit. The concept of discipline, I've already discussed discipline there. I will not discuss it here. But what you should understand now in this discipline here is that in the learning process, when a child is learning, for example, it can help learners to develop self-control. They can control their behavior. They can control, they've got a sense of what is right and what is wrong. It can also limit and guide the learners' progress in their own learning when they are disciplined. Self-concept and motives. What we mean by motives are the treatment that a child receives plays a role in how they develop self-concept and how they receive this treatment. Children that are most likely to develop positive self-concept, when these children, when they grow up, they are actually more likely to develop a positive self-concept about themselves. However, if people are negative towards a child when a child is growing up, that child is most likely to develop a negative self-concept. So it is important that people in the community, including our own parents, our own teachers in our environment, our pastors in our church, our peers, all these people in the community have positive attitude towards you as a person. Otherwise, it can also lead to a negative self-concept as you are growing up. Our personality makes us who we are, and our sense of character. So it's very important that we look at that. The TB illness, what I want you to do on another TB illness, you must know what are the symptoms. For example, the issue of coughing that lasts longer than 2 weeks, the issue of weight loss, the issue of fatigue, the issues of fever, chills, chest pain, loss of appetite, etc. Those are the symptoms. Discuss them. And of course, we've got the complication of untreated active TB. If your TB has not been treated, what will happen to you as a human being? Your system, your body might develop drug-resistant TB, whereby no matter how much drugs you get for TB, your body has developed a resistance towards the illness. And then sometimes, some people, they might develop this long-term damage to the lungs, meaning that there's a damage that has happened to your lungs or to your liver, and this sometimes TB can also spread to your eyes if you do not take your medication seriously. The impact of HIV and AIDS. For a child or for a learner in your classroom who has lost parents due to HIV and AIDS, some of these learners are actually forced to be breadwinners. They're actually forced to become parents to their own younger siblings. Some of these children, they're actually forced to go and live with external family members, and this, at the end of the day, it can affect their learning process because they will be living in a new environment with other caregivers who are not their parents. Sometimes they are worried about their younger siblings because their parents have passed on due to HIV and AIDS, and this can affect their learning in a negative way. As the community, we need to offer support to the children that are orphaned due to HIV and AIDS. How do we show this support? We can show them love. We can support them. You can provide for those who are learners in your classroom, whereby their own parents are actually living with HIV and AIDS. These children, you can actually help them by giving them help. For example, assisting them to get to the hospital, providing clean water for them and everything, and good nutrition, and or referring them to where they can get this help. Let's quickly move on to the last part. There are only 3 points here. Here is language learning. What should we learn? Language to interact with each other. For our own problem-solving issues, we use language. When you want to ask questions, when you want to get answers, we use language. Simply, short. That's why we need language. The behavioral problem of stealing. When a child is stealing, there could be causes. Why is the child stealing? A child's desire for items is greater than their level of self-control. Why is it that the child has a need to steal? Why don't they have self-control over their own impulse of trying to steal? We must know what that is causes. How do you handle this problem when a child is having a problem of stealing in your classroom? As a teacher, you assess the nature and the severity of the child's behavioral issues. If you need to, you can refer the child to a social worker through the Ministry of Gender and Social Services. And then the last part, social development domain affecting learning. These are things like social interacting with children. They help children to improve their own learning, expose children to strong social skills, help them to develop social emotional growth, try to keep a child's environment interesting. Children must not only watch TV to be entertained. You can actually entertain the children outside the home, outside the TV, and for them to develop strong social skills. I was running out of time. That is basically it. My presentation ends there. Thank you very much, and all the best for the 2020 exams. Thank you.